Welcome to the awesomers.com podcast. If you love to learn, and if you're motivated to expand your mind, and heck, if you desire to break through those traditional paradigms and find your own version of success, you are in the right place. Awesomers around the world are on a journey to improve their lives and the lives of those around them. We believe in paying it forward, and we fundamentally try to live up to the great Zig Ziglar quote, where he said, "You can have everything in your life you want if you help enough other people get what they want." It doesn't matter where you came from, it only matters where you're going. My name is Steve Simonson, and I hope you will join me on this awesomer journey.
If you're launching a new product manufactured in China, you will need professional, high-resolution, Amazon-ready photographs. Because Simo Global has a team of professionals in China, you will oftentimes receive your listings photographs before your product even leaves the country. This streamlined process will save you the time, money, and energy needed to concentrate on marketing and other creative content strategies before your item is in stock and ready for sale. Visit simoglobal.com to learn more, because a picture should be worth 1,000 keywords.
You are listening to podcast episode number 57 for the awesomers.com podcast. And that's right, episode number 57. All you have to do is go to awesomers.com/57 to find all the show notes and the fun little details and links and things like that we may talk about throughout this episode. Now, today, Whitney Cole joins the podcast, and she is talking about her company and her concept of creating a mission, and she calls herself the Mission Maven, which I find to be both clever and great marketing and accurate. Now, by way of background, Whitney is a consultant, speaker, and writer on a mission to help life-saving, life-changing technology break through the noise and achieve mass user adoption. Her three-step process to amplifying the messages of health tech companies increases user engagement and drives customers to buy. She translates difficult technology concepts into simple, approachable, and readable content for your ideal customer. And I'm really excited to have Whitney join us today, because she's going to talk about all the important things that it takes to connect with that audience and to, synthesize your message down into something that's usable. So I know that you're thrilled to be here, because I'm thrilled to have you here, and we're going to get into this episode right now. Welcome back, Awesomers. It's me, Steve Simonson. I'm back again with another episode, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, Whitney. Whitney, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
I'm very well. So Whitney Cole has been working on a bunch of stuff, and as you guys heard from the bio, the read-in, she's got a lot of experience. But Whitney, in your own words, can you just share kind of what you do day to day and where you live?
Sure. Yeah. So I focus heavily on content. I work mostly with health tech startups, also like mission-driven companies. So social good companies, anybody basically who's out to change the world. I work with them to figure out who their ideal customer is, and then how to create content for that customer, as well as how to distribute that content so you're getting in front of your ideal customer, so that you can break your message through the noise. Because a lot of times these companies that are focused on changing the world, they don't have either the knowledge or the tools to be able to do that. So I come in and help them come up with that strategy.
Boy, the book Good to Great talks about having a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. And changing the world's got to be right up there among the top.
Yeah,
ones,
right.
It's like I could go take a nap, or I could change the world. That's
right.
I can't wait to dive into some of that and hear maybe some of your examples, because this concept of having the big idea is not foreign to an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. But sometimes the concept of actually breaking it down and doing something about it, or as entrepreneurs might understand, getting leads or contacts or customers at the end of the day is much more difficult than having the idea. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. Yeah. And I think where it breaks down is a lot of times, you think you have your market figured out. And often when I come and start working with an entrepreneur, they have done a lot of market research. So they think they know who their customer is, but it turns out they know a lot of numbers, like they know their age, or they know where they live, or they know how many years they've been educated for, or whatever, but they don't know them as a person. So helping them like understand who they are as a person and what motivates them, what drives them, that's where I come in to help them figure out how to communicate with that person so you motivate them to adopt your technology or buy your product or whatever it is.
I like it. So if my takeaway from that is the precise avatar that you're going for, that precise target ideal customer may be different than the obvious demographics of, 35-year-old to 45-year-old female living in urban areas. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah. So you have to start with the demographic information, and it's, if you don't have that, you're kind of just making things up as you go. Right. But so you have to start there.
Yes.
But what I often recommend my clients do is think of a real person who either inspired you to create your technology, because especially in health tech, there's often in the founding story somewhere, there's often a reason that this person created their products. Like it could have been for a person that they actually knew. Or a customer that you've already helped. Even if you have a minimum viable product and you're doing beta testing, there's someone that you have helped already. So thinking of an actual real life person that you've already helped or who needs your technology, that's way more powerful than having like a fictional customer or just a set of demographics that you know about your audience.
Boy, that is definitely the most powerful thing, is to, have those actual use cases, ideally, if you have them, or a precise, let's label it. And, this is Sally and she's got this problem, and here's how our tool or solution is going to help her. Is that along the lines?
Yeah, exactly.
Can you give us an example of what a health tech type of company does for those out there who may not be familiar?
Yeah. So, okay. And this is like, I just love this day and age because like, I feel like there's so many products changing the way we do healthcare, whether it's for consumers or for the healthcare provider. So health tech is kind of broad reaching, or digital health, med tech, all of those terms can apply. But it's pretty broad reaching. So it can be either technology products that are geared for like doctors or healthcare providers, that sort of thing. Or and you'll see this a lot, there are products that are geared for consumers to manage their health from home. So like one of my customers had a wearable for heart patients. Another one had a product that women use from home to manage their fertility. So either direct to consumer or to the doctors or healthcare providers. So it's very broad reaching, but that's kind of the gist of it.
Got it. And boy, I think you said it really well, which is this day and age that we live in is the explosion, right, of wearables. It's the explosion of easy access technology where, your mobile phone is telling you what your heart rate is, or,
Exactly.
what sleeping patterns. This is definitely the salad days of technology and healthcare convergence. So I love this. We're going to dig into it and talk a lot about, how you're able to help customers, how you're able to help them get with the messaging. But we're going to do that and talk about your origin story right after this break.
Catalyst 88 was developed to help entrepreneurs achieve their short and long-term goals in e-commerce markets by utilizing the power of shared entrepreneurial wisdom. Entrepreneurship is nothing if not lessons to be learned. Learn from others, learn from us. I guarantee that we will learn from you. Visit catalyst88.com because your success is our success. Giddy up.
Okay, we're back again. Awesomer, Steve Simonson. And we're talking with Whitney Cole, and she's gonna tell us a little bit later about how we break down our audience and how we kind of communicate with them. Maybe a little storytelling. I don't know. That might be a spoiler alert. I'm just speculating. But Whitney, I like to start at the very beginning. Tell me where you were born.
Sure. So I was born in Denver, Colorado. So kind of out west by the mountains.
Yeah, Mile High, right?
Yeah.
That's definitely a big football town. Do your parents, are they entrepreneurial, or what kind of work did they do?
My father is a minister at a church. So, like you kind of do have to be a little bit entrepreneurial. I can never say that word right, by the way.
It sounded pretty good.
You do have to have that mindset a little bit, I think, because you're kind of, for him, he's in a smaller, type of church. And so he has to come up with ideas and, lead his congregation and whatever. So my mom was a piano teacher. She had her own piano studio. So a little bit of entrepreneurship is in there too.
Yeah, both. I would say, if you got to drive leads, collect money, and keep going. Yeah, that makes sense. Any siblings in the fold there?
I have 3 sisters, so there are 4 girls. My dad always said he lived in a girls' dormitory, lucky him, right?
Yeah, he's definitely being tested.
Yeah.
So now, are they in the entrepreneurial world like you, or what types of things do they do?
Yeah. So one sister is a stay-at-home mom. She's got two adorable little boys. And then they also do foster care. So not so much entrepreneur, but she's, she's changing the world in her own way with caring for kids. Another sister is, yeah, she does a lot of freelance writing. So she's kind of started her own business with that. And then my youngest sister's a nurse.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a lot of variety there.
Yeah, right.
How about, did you go to university?
I did. I went to a small private school in South Carolina.
How
So
did you like that experience? Was it something you enjoyed or hard for you? How'd you go with it?
I love school, so I enjoyed it at the time. And looking back, I think I don't know that I would have, I was an English major. I don't know that I would have changed my major, but I might have taken like more business classes or something, so because I have a liberal arts degree, so I didn't have a lot of real world practical application. But on the flip side, I learned a lot about literature and just the way humans work. So I think that was helpful.
Nice. Excellent. And how about your first job? What I like to call a proper job. How would you characterize your first one?
Okay, so my family was really big. My mom was a piano teacher, like I said, so we were big into music as kids. So my first job, when I was in 7th grade, I started teaching violin and piano lessons, actually.
In
So
7th grade, you were teaching
in
already.
7th grade, yeah, and they were
Wow.
young students. They were like 5 and 6 years old. So yeah, that was my first job. I found out very quickly that I don't have the skills to be a teacher, but I did that all through high school. So that was my first job. I also, I had like a newspaper route. I don't know if that's a proper job, but I did have that as well. And then after college, I worked through college doing just random stuff. But after college, I had a job as a content strategist, and that's kind of what got me started doing what I do today.
Content strategist, definitely in the heart of e-commerce. Was that
Mhm.
something in the local region? Did you stay in the Denver area?
When I was one, actually, we moved to Illinois, where my mom's family was. So I'm in the Midwest now. I'm in
Ah,
Wisconsin. So, but yeah, so it was in Northern Illinois, that job, and it was for just a firm that did a lot of like private security and that sort of thing. And I I remember at that job I did a lot of reading because there was a lot of downtime, and so I did a lot of reading like in my industry, in content specifically. And I came from an English background. I knew I loved to write, but I didn't know how to monetize it, so I started reading HubSpot. You're probably familiar with their
sure.
blog, their marketing blog, and all like a whole bunch of blogs like that. I just started reading all their stuff. I'm like, wow, this is so cool. I love this. And then around that same time, I also started freelancing on the side, to make a little extra income. And I was like, this is pretty cool. Like I could do this long term if I wanted, without having to deal with, employers and all of that good stuff.
Oh yeah, I hear you for sure. So how about from that point to where you are today? Was there any defining moment that kind of set you on your path?
Yeah. So when I had that job for a few years, and I was married at the time. And then a few years later, I had our first kid, and I had some friends at that job who they were moms as well, and the employer just did not give them flexibility, to go pick up their kid from daycare or do school drop off or whatever. And also maternity leave was dismal. So I was like, well, screw that. I'm going to do my own thing. And I was like, I'm going to do this freelancing thing full time. So that was the defining moment, was when I had my first kid. I realized that I didn't want to be stuck in a job that didn't let me have the family life I wanted. But I also still wanted to use the skills that I had been given. So
Yeah, not wanting to be stuck is a pretty good motivation to
right.
become an entrepreneur and kind of take control, take the reins yourself. I definitely think women in particular have such an opportunity to be able
Yeah,
to balance more, right? I mean, you get to
right.
set your own schedule, presumably now.
Exactly. Right. And I do have set hours, but that can change depending on what I need for my family at the time. So, there are more logistics to figure out. Like you have to figure out childcare, because as much as I would love to not have to pay for childcare, it's impossible to work and have screaming children at the same time. So, there are different logistics, but it's been amazing, and I love it. And it's totally changed my mindset too, like to just break free of that employee mindset and just, I don't know, be my own boss. I would not, I don't know that I'd be able to be a full-time employee at this point now, after after working
Yeah.
for myself.
Even if I had the qualifications, which I don't, I definitely wouldn't be able to sit in the cube. That would not work.
Yeah, right.
How about any big lesson learned that you've learned along the way?
So, when I jumped in, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I think that is a good lesson in itself. I think sometimes it's really easy to get stuck in the planning and never do. And even today, I find myself doing this. I'm like, oh, I have these great ideas and I plan them all out and then I don't do them. So just, I don't think it's good to be ignorant. Like, I think you need knowledge, but don't get stuck in the knowledge gathering stage. Just jump in and do it as much as possible.
Boy, action is a pretty good bit of advice there. Sometimes it's better to take action and tweak it as you go than it is to never take action. I'll give you a quick story.
Exactly.
One time we were looking at buying this company, and they were a public company at the time, and they had done pretty well, but it was during the .com crash, and they were definitely on their last legs. So we were going to come in and do a reverse merger and so forth. And so we came in and we're like, all right, how much revenue do you have? And they're like, we don't have any revenue. And we're like, what do you have? They had money, of course, because they'd raised money. And we're like, well, what are all these people? You got like 50 or 60 people running around. What are they doing? They're like, hey, we built this big book of how we do stuff. And we're like, but you don't do any of it. And they're like, yeah, but we got the book, right? And that ultimately did not lead to, didn't make the acquisition. They died a miserable death. And they had spent millions of dollars making this book without actually ever doing anything. And so I'm a big fan of just, build the airplane while you fly it and iterate, get smart fast. I'm not
exactly. Yeah.
I don't want to excuse sloppiness, but how ironic that I mess up that. So tell me this, along your path, Whitney, did you ever have a time, where you said, maybe I should just go back to the old 9-to-5 gig. This is too much for me. Did you ever want to give up?
I think that happens about once a month because it's always hard, right? You're going to always have hard times, and just chugging through them and getting through them anyway, and knowing that there's a hard time today, but there may be a better time around the corner. And just like, even when it's hard, taking that daily consistent action. I think back when I was a kid and taking music lessons, that taught me a powerful lesson in and of itself. Like, you don't get better at playing the violin by just looking at your violin. You get better at playing at the violin by practicing it every single day. So that's kind of similar to how I still can't say that word, entrepreneurs have to think, right? Like, you just have to take that daily consistent action. You just have to practice every single day. And someday you'll be the virtuoso playing on Carnegie Hall.
Oh, very good. I like that metaphor because, too often we're impatient. And I think particularly entrepreneurs today and perhaps the hashtag millennials out there, it seems like you could be in that group, but
yeah.
they're impatient, right? They're like, hey, I've heard of, I've seen it on TV. And by the way, the guys on Facebook, they're traveling, they're living the dream.
Right.
I want that. And I want it right now.
Exactly.
Gosh, it takes time. And what they see on whether it's television or Facebook or Instagram or whatever, is the result of so much effort and so much work and that daily practice and trying to get better. They don't see that. They only see the result. And so I like to remind people of any, background, it takes time, it takes energy. And I think that's very good takeaway. How about, was there a best day in your professional life that you can call out and maybe remember sharing with the audience?
It's been more recently because I used to struggle practicing what I preached. I always told my clients, like, you need to do content because content is how you reach your ideal customer. And I didn't practice what I preached myself. So I don't know if it's the best day, but like a best time period where I actually see it working for myself, because I started doing it for myself and creating content and seeing it just generate leads has been really amazing. Like, there, like I used to have to hustle to find new people to work for and work with. And then once I started creating my content, they just like start coming to me, which is pretty cool. That's the way it's supposed to work, right?
Well, I love that. Yeah. Well, that's a perfect proof case. So that's, when you start seeing what you do pay off, it feels almost magical to me. I mean, there's electricity when you're like, I knew it would work, but it's working. It's always gratifying to see. So that's definitely a good one. How about a tool maybe that you use in your day-to-day whether it's an app or a mobile app or just some tool that you use to help you kind of get by each day to day? What's your favorite?
Yeah. So CoSchedule, it's a content marketing calendar. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's actually really awesome because not only can you put all your content in there to plan out, I need to publish this blog post here, I need to have this article here, this video here. You can also, they have a feature called Requeue, which means you can put content in there, like evergreen content that's relevant for the long haul. You can put that content in there and it will post it again on social media for you, like every year or so. So once you have that built out, then it helps you at least have some content going out, and you still need to be engaged and be personal on the platform, your platforms, and be posting as a human as well, not just a reposting app. But it's pretty cool to just have it working for you too.
And that was called CoSchedule?
CoSchedule, yeah.
Is it coschedule.com?
Yes, it's CoSchedule, like COSCH, I can't spell, but EDULE, I think.
All right. Hello, English major. If any of the two of us are going to spell it,
Yeah.
so we'll assume that the show notes people can
we'll get it
spell
right.
schedule, and we'll try to get the link into the show notes as well. So now that we've kind of laid a little background, and I'm appreciating you sharing some of the origin story, we're going to dive a little bit more into how you got into doing exactly what you're doing today. And maybe even a prediction or two for the future. So we're going to do that right after this break.
Hey Amazon Marketplace professionals, this is Parsimony ERP, and we get one question over and over. Can you please tell me exactly what Parsimony does? Well, we'll try, but this is only a 30-second spot, so we're going to have to hurry. Connect to your Seller Central account and pull all the new orders. Enter the orders with all customer data. Enter all of the Amazon fees and charges. Store them at the item level. Generate profit and loss reports at the SKU level. Automatically generate income statements. Handle multiple companies. Handle multiple brands. Handle multiple currencies. Facilitate budgets and forecasts. Store all customer interactions in a sophisticated CRM system. Manage your supply chain. Project and task management. Maintain an audit log. Hey, you get it. That's Parsimony, PARSIMONY.com. Parsimony.com. We've got that.
Hey everybody, it's Steve Simonson. We're back again on awesomers.com podcast. And today, Whitney Cole is sharing a little bit of her background and some pretty great takeaways, things like taking action. Hey, who would have thunk it? This is a good idea. And actually being able to practice what you preach. By the way, not always obvious. As they say, the cobbler's kids are the last one to get shoes. So sometimes we got to tend to our own house. So Whitney, tell us about where in your journey did you start getting into this health tech space and so on?
Yeah. So when I started, I worked with anybody who would pay me, right? Because that's kind of where we all have to start. We just need to make money. But when I sat down and really thought about why I do what I do and the clients that I resonate with the most, it's always the ones who are in health tech of some sort. It could be a fertility app. It could be, like I mentioned before, a heart wearable, but anybody who is working in the health space. And it didn't click for me, and it really should have a long time ago, but I was born with congenital aortic stenosis, which means, a lot of kids are born with that. Not a lot, but it's a pretty common heart condition. If you're going to have a heart condition, that's going to be one of the more common ones. And some people don't need it corrected until they're older, or they don't need it corrected at all, but mine was pretty severe. So I had to have emergency open heart surgery when I was 3 days old, because it was like they discovered it right before I left the hospital, and they're like, oh, your kid has a heart condition, and so she needs surgery. So the fact that I'm here today is because of really awesome doctors and then technology that allowed them to diagnose my problem. So making that connection between technology saved my life, and really brilliant, innovative people saved my life, to wow, I'm helping these people with innovative technology save other people's lives, or, make doctors' jobs easier, or whatever. Once I made that connection, it was like everything clicked together, and it was really powerful. I think when people tell you to figure out your why, that's what they're telling. And I always thought, oh, my why is my kids, or my why is so I can have a free lifestyle. But my why was actually a lot deeper than that. And once I figured that out, it was and started telling my story, it really resonated with people, and people were like, oh, wow, that's amazing. And we totally get why you do what you do.
Yeah, boy, oh boy. So what a great brand, right? You call yourself the Mission Maven, and it's because you have this mission, right? And wow, that mission began, little did you know at the time, but at 3 days old, you went in for heart surgery.
Yes. Yeah.
3 days.
3 days old. And then I had
Tiny
another
little
one.
heart.
I know. And that's what my mom said. She said she looked at the surgeon's hands. Obviously, I don't remember this at all, but she said she looked at the surgeon's hands and she was like, they were huge. And they told them that my heart was the size of a quarter at the time. And so she's like, how do those hands operate on that tiny little heart? But they did, and I'm here today. So
Yeah. And you were just about to say it sounds like you went in again.
yeah. So with this type of condition, when you have a valve problem, the fixes that there's not really a great cure at this point. So the fixes that they do have to be redone down the road. So when I was 15, I had a repair on my valve. And then when I was 16, we went back to the doctor and he's like, that repair didn't work. So we need to do another surgery. So that was a bad year.
Wow.
Talk about like being in high school and all that teenage angst and whatever, but it was a rough year. And I had 2 surgeries back to back. And I've been fine since, but they do say I'll probably have to have another one down the road. So,
well, as I think about that, first of all, it's extraordinarily compelling, but I would like them to work on a punch card system for you, so you can.
I know.
After the 4th one, you should get a couple free or something.
Exactly. I know.
Even some airline miles. I don't know, just something. That's amazing. So obviously, you became very deeply connected to this idea that technology and healthcare have high value to not just yourself, but the world that we live in.
Right. Yeah. And when I was in high school, so back when I was having those surgeries, I think a lot of people walk into hospitals, right? And they're like, ooh, this is where people go to die. But I walked into the hospital, I'm like, this is where I have to go to live, So I always thought hospitals were really cool. And I was like, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a congenital cardiologist someday and help other kids like me. And then I took high school biology and I was like, well, this isn't my thing. So I went to college and I majored in English. And I was always a little bit disappointed that I wasn't going to be a doctor because I was like, I mean, I wish I could. I wish I could do that. I wish I could be a doctor and help people. I wish I could work at a hospital, and then, but I just don't have the skill set for it. Like my sister's a nurse, like I said, and she's got the personality and the skill set to be a nurse, but I don't. But once I made the connection that I can use the gifts that I have to help people who are changing the world save lives, that was really cool for me because it was like, well, I can't be a doctor because I don't have those skills, but they don't have my skills, so I can use my skills to help them.
I love it. Well, it really is a great way to pair up 2 levels of expertise. In fact, it's very fair to say that very few people would have the specialty skills of the healthcare profession, obviously, with the exception of those who studied it. But it's I can't imagine. I know some doctors and some of my friends are surgeons and so on. I can't imagine them being awesome at content creation and awesome at technology, kind of harnessing, whatever they have to do to get their job done. They're probably very, very good at that. But the rest of it, I imagine it's probably like a foreign language to them.
Yeah. And so I work with a lot of, they may not be practicing medicine, but they have some sort of degree in medicine or biology or something. And so some of them are actual MDs and some of them are people who are engineers or something in the life sciences. And what I find is they are incredible. I mean, obviously they're incredibly smart, right? They've like, they have all these degrees and they've normally built an awesome product. But they don't have the tools to make that simple for people. And so if they create content for themselves, or if they create content without getting a strategy behind it, they create content that's written at like a 12th grade or college reading level. And that's not readable by the average consumer. I mean, maybe if you're in college, it's readable, but nobody wants to read that for fun when they're perusing the internet.
Oh, interesting. So tell me, so you're saying that they need to make that message easier to read?
Exactly. Yeah. So,
okay.
So they are, it's almost like they speak in a different language. They speak in medical techies or something like that. And so people just don't understand that. So what I do is I come in and I help them figure out, first of all, who their customer is, but then how to translate their message into something that's really easily consumable by people who need to hear it the most.
So can you give us an example, frame up a typical problem? You've alluded to this idea that they are not communicating in a straightforward way, a layman's way, right? You know, when we want to read it, we need to understand it. And if the doctors are throwing out all the, warped factor 7 and all those other techie terms, I know I went Star Trek there, but that's the best I can do.
Right.
Then we're not going to engage with the content, presumably. So
Exactly.
how do you see that, and how do you solve that?
Okay, so perfect example of that. I had a client, I mentioned her before, who was in fertility tech, and she had this really awesome product, and it was helping women here in the US and the developed world, but also women in the developing world take control of their reproductive health, and just, like, be in charge of their bodies so that they can have the freedom to give back to their communities. So she had a really awesome product, but it just seemed like nobody was listening to her. Like, she was struggling getting traction, and she and her team were working really hard. They were doing a lot of PR. They were doing just like a lot of ads to get traction for their product. And they would get users, and then the second they stopped spending money on ads, those users would just drop off. Any user acquisition they had just plummeted. And so they were really, really struggling. So I sat down with them and we looked at their content, and it was actually their content that they were creating, and the content that they wanted me to create for them was very focused on people who were just like them. So this client was very focused on changing the world. She wanted to change the conversations around reproductive health, but that wasn't a conversation that her ideal customer was necessarily interested in hearing. So they weren't necessarily, so she had a paid for product, and then she had free products she offered to people in the developing world. So the paid for product was more geared towards the US and the developed world, to kind of fund her endeavors in the developing world. So, but they were just struggling to get traction for that. And because their content was focused on, this is what we need to do to change the world, and this is how global health organizations can help. And so, like not something that her customer would really want to read. So once we figured out exactly who her customer was and came up with the whole strategy behind how to create content that really reached this customer, her sales for her paid product went up like 11%. And then this was a really cool number. Engagement of users on a weekly basis for her product was up like 393%. So people were like just way more engaged with their product, whether they were new customers or existing customers from before or whatever. But it was really cool to see like the difference in, once she started creating content for the customer, how it affected like just her sales and her customer engagement.
Boy, and engagement is a number that, doesn't necessarily immediately tie to sales or profit, but long term, it is a branding move that you cannot be beat. People who are really part of the movement, so to speak, they are, extraordinarily valuable, and they want to help. They want to be part of that movement. Don't you?
Exactly. Yeah. And that engagement number was across her paid and unpaid version of her product. So, like those engaged customers could turn into paid customers, so it was just really cool. It was cool to see.
That's a very fine example. So a typical problem sounds like that they're not talking to their ideal avatar. So they got to find out who that is. And then you got to customize the content that speaks to that audience in a, let's say a relatable way, right?
Right.
So you got to talk to them the way they want to be talked to. What other tips do you have in terms of, creating content or making this engagement happen?
Yeah. So when you're so the first step is always figuring out who that customer is. Because if you don't know who that customer is, you can't create content for them. And a lot of people do want to skip that step. And then the second step is figuring out what that customer's core challenge is. So that's what I do with them. Once we figure out their customer, then we kind of figure out this overlapping core challenge that their customer faces. And normally they know this. They may not be able to communicate it in words that would speak to the customer, but they typically know kind of what the main problem is. And then from there, we break it down into like kind of the sub challenges that make up that main challenge, And so each of those sub challenges becomes a pillar piece of content. And then you can create content, like subtopics under that content. Like it's kind of, I call it self-multiplying, because once you have those pillars, like the types of content you can come up with are almost endless. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Of course, I have a deep amount of experience struggling to create content. And so I'm highly related to this idea. So to me, if I could drive the point home, and you correct me here if I'm wrong, but a lot of people that in their own lenses, when they look out themselves, they're like, well, what's interesting about what I'm doing? They they have a harder time coming up with subject matter or those pillars to start with, right? They don't know what are the pillars that are exciting, and something that they find to be, just kind of, yeah, that's just the way it is. It can be very exciting to their audience, but because we see it every day, we're kind of like, no, that tree's always there. It doesn't matter.
Exactly.
No, that's a really cool tree. Let's talk about it. So once you have those pillars, then you said the subsets of those, it allows you to create content endlessly. Can you give us any examples? Do you have any memories of those?
So I'll give you my own example, because I said before I didn't practice what I preached. So once I started practicing that, my core problem that my customers face is that they just can't break through the noise. So there's so much noise online, they just can't get through. And it's kind of the outline that I just gave for reaching your customers with content is, first of all, they don't know who their customer is. So that's one pillar. And then secondly, they don't create content for that customer. So they're creating content that nobody cares about. That's the second pillar. And then the third pillar is they don't know how to distribute their content to the right channel so that they get in front of their customer. So those are my three pillars. And then after that, I have like how to create a customer avatar, or, how to figure out who your ideal customer is, or what kinds of problems does your customer face and how to figure those out, that type of thing. So each one generates more content. And then the cool thing about once you have your list of topics under each pillar is that you can create like 2 or 3 types of content from each topic. So it might be a blog post, but then it could also be a customer story, and it could also be an infographic or a video or something like that. So once you have the topic, then you can almost like endlessly generate content on that topic. Not endlessly, but because there's only so many types of content you can produce, and you can do it across several channels. So you can do the same topic on LinkedIn, and you can do the same topic on Quora or Twitter, and then you do it on your blog, and you do it on YouTube. And so really, like, it just opens tons of possibilities.
Boy, it definitely sounds like that kind of, it's like when you're trying to open the pickle jar, right? Once it gets loose, then it's easy to get at the pickles, but
Right.
until you get that cap off, man, it's it's a bear. So let me ask you this, because I think in this day and age where we have so many different social outlets and things like that, is there, I'm sure it varies by avatar, but is there any advice you would give somebody about where they should look first in terms of the distribution mechanisms?
Yeah, so it really does depend on your avatar. Like if your avatar is on Facebook, if your avatar is not on Facebook, that should not be where you're focusing. I think a lot of people think, oh, I should just be on Facebook because that's where everybody else is. But if your avatar is not on Facebook, then don't be there. Like don't focus your energies on there. Don't focus your resources on there. So go back to your customer avatar and figure what channels they're on. Where did they consume their content? And then also think about like who influences them. So, maybe they're a millennial and they're influenced by pop stars or other entrepreneurs or something like that. So that will give you insight into what channels to be on. And then think about who their friends are. Like, are their friends, the same age as them? What channels do they use? Are they on just are they just on Twitter? Are they just on Instagram? Like, where are they? And then from there, that's where you distribute your content. I think a lot of people ignore a couple really powerful channels too. Quora is a big one, and one that's really powerful in health tech because you can really become an expert on that channel. And then I think LinkedIn sometimes gets a bad rap because people think, oh, it's just a professional network. But, those professionals are people too. And there's a lot of really good conversations happening on LinkedIn. So distributing your content there is actually really good too.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good tip. Quora is definitely a very high ranking on the search results. So if you can get your expertise shared there, I think there's probably a high chance of it being visible there.
Right. So answering questions on Quora. There's even an option to blog on Quora, which I always recommend having your own blog first. So you get all the SEO value from that. But then if you have the resources, start a blog, repurpose some of your content for Quora too, because then it's just giving you one more avenue to be on to get people to know who you are.
How do we feel about Reddit in this world that we live in?
I haven't used it a lot, but I think it's also underused. So I'm looking into, figuring out the best ways to use it. I've been doing some reading on it. I think the verdict's still kind of out a little bit because as with any platform, everybody's always changing their algorithms to make it more user-friendly and more focused on the customer and whatever. So you kind of have to keep up with that. And I think Reddit made recent changes that makes it a little harder, but I think just engaging in conversation, whether it's Quora or Reddit or LinkedIn or Facebook or, just engaging with conversation human to human is really powerful. So if you use Reddit, be a human. If you use Quora, be human. Don't be
I
a
think
brand.
that's a very smart bit of advice. I think Reddit is quite punitive. If they think you're just popping in to sell them something, they will destroy you. And
Right,
so
exactly.
tread very lightly, and that's probably true of any platform. Whether I think on Reddit they'll just proactively let you know how much they hate you.
Yeah, yeah,
Not
right.
to say that doesn't exist on other social networks, but boy, they're pretty tough.
I think on other social networks, people are more used to seeing it, so they might not react as strongly against
They
it.
just
But
ignore it a little bit.
yeah, on Reddit, they just don't like it, so they don't put up with it.
Yeah, that's good time. So we've talked about kind of the general nature of the problem that people face and a couple of the solutions. Are there any other kind of key solutions that you would recommend to people that we haven't talked about so far?
Those are the three main ones: coming up with your customer avatar, coming up with the content. I call it a content tree. So you have the I guess it's the root of the tree, the core problem, and then you kind of branch out from there. And then the distribution path. So like, where do you need to put your content? And think about underused places that nobody else is using. I I have some friends who started doing video on LinkedIn, I don't know, like a year ago. And they because they were the first ones to start creating video on LinkedIn, they're now major influencers on LinkedIn. So like, figure out that platform, become the first one to do something on a platform. And then, it's much easier when you don't have as much competition.
Well, that means I'm going to be the best guy on Google Plus.
Actually, yeah, that one's kind of dead, right?
No, I agree with you. I actually also agree that LinkedIn is an underutilized asset. And I think it's just on the cusp of actually a tipping point on LinkedIn. So, 3-4 years ago, I never expected Facebook to be so business centric or had the potential to be business centric, where most of my relationships on Facebook are largely professional. I've got my friends and I got some family, but the massive majority of the folks, whatever the 1,000 people I'm connected to, are professional on some level. Mm-hmm. And that's afforded us the chance to interact with people on a pretty frequent basis. But I think LinkedIn is now has more engaging types of content, and they made their streams of news and all that stuff a little bit easier and a little bit better. And despite the fact they were bought by Microsoft, they seem to be innovating. So kudos. Yeah. And Microsoft's still getting the job done. So if you are in a professional environment where particularly you sell business to business, I would take another look at LinkedIn as well. That's good.
Yeah.
Good recommend by you.
And I think their algorithm's a little bit simpler than maybe Facebook. Like, you see the posts of the people that and their second connections or whatever. So I just think it's simpler and a little bit easier to hack. If that's the right word.
It is the right word. Honestly, all of these platforms, once we figure out what works, we really lean into that technique. And then, the algorithm gods decide that, oh, no, that's, we don't want that to work anymore. So we go away. Instagram actually just modified their algorithm so that it actually, instead of being time focused, that it's now more relationship focused. Mm-hmm. And that as much as 75-80% of the posts that you were making on Instagram, even the people who follow you were not necessarily seeing because of time. Now, no matter when those posts were, they're still fresh in the mind of your follower, regardless of when that follower comes on. Do you find that to be interesting, or have you noticed that yet?
Yeah, so I don't do a ton on Instagram. Most of my clients prefer LinkedIn and Quora and that sort of thing. But I have done some, and I did notice that change. So I do think that's interesting, and I think it can be helpful too, as long as you're working to develop those relationships and keeping your audience engaged.
Yeah, as always, it turns out actual work and real relationships, genuine things work.
Yes.
All right, so I want you to get out your crystal ball before we share the bonus that you have for the audience out there, and tell us what you think is going to happen in 5 years. How will your industry look? How will, whether it's a content creation or the health tech or med tech, whatever you called it, how is this going to change in the next 5 years?
I think that in one sense it's going to change, but in another sense it's going to be the same as it always has been, in that relationships, like we were just talking about, are the most important thing. So it doesn't matter what the next social media platform is or what the next new distribution channel is. It's all about developing those relationships and being human. I think a lot of times we fall into the trap of being a brand and being, I'm Microsoft or I'm Google or whatever. And that's how you communicate with your customers. But the reality is that people don't buy from brands, they buy from people. So of course, yes, I go buy Starbucks. That's not a person I'm interacting with, but I buy Starbucks because I like the people who work there. I like my Starbucks. So people are buying from people. They're not buying necessarily from a brand. So even if you have a brand, engage as, be as personable as possible. Engage as much as you can as a person.
I think that's really good advice. How do people scale that type of concept? As you get bigger and bigger, maybe the founder can't do blog posts every day. And so somebody's on the team helping them, whether it's a person like yourself or somebody on the inside team. How do they maintain that kind of relationship building idea?
So I think it's all about communicating with your team that relationships are important. I think that sometimes where people struggle, they bring in a new person and they don't explain the why behind their company. Like, why are we here? What are we doing? And if you explain that you're here trying to help people, and it's not about sales. I mean, it is about sales, but it's not about sales. It's about helping people. I think that helps your team communicate better. And then also, one thing I find is if a company does not have the strategy that I help them put together, their team communicates as a brand, or they kind of have multiple personality disorder and just communicate however they feel in the moment. So if you have a strategy behind how you always talk to people, how you should always be perceived, that helps your team create the type of content, whether they're creating it as a ghostwriter for the CEO or just as branded content. It helps it create the type of content that you want your brand to be creating.
Yeah, so it is doable. And if you do suffer from that multiple personality, we'll call it the Sybil effect of content creation,
Right.
It's not going to be as good as having that consistency of being on brand and developing relationships. I do think that people speak differently. I think they act differently when they're about the long term versus the hurry up and buy something from me so I can get on to the next person, right?
Exactly.
That's pretty obvious. And I think, if anything, technology has shown us those kind of naked efforts to separate us from our money versus actually adding value, right? And at the end of the day, if you add value, you have long-term sustainability. And if you're just there to take money away from somebody else, it's not going to work as well, yeah?
Exactly, yeah.
So Whitney, tell us about the little bonus you have for the awesomers out there.
Sure. So creating and figuring out who your customer avatar is does not have to be hard. I've put together a template that you can use to figure out, it's like a questionnaire to figure out who your ideal customer is, as well as helping you come up with that self-multiplying content I was talking about. So if you go to the missionmaven.com/awesomers, and that will be in the show notes, correct? Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
If you go to that link, you will be able to get that resource. And yeah, hopefully it will help you figure out who your customer is and how you can create content for them.
All right. So for all those who are squinched up and seized up with this idea of identifying your avatar, we're giving you an easy way to do it. Whitney's taking you out of the fire and bringing you back down to earth and letting you know that, hey, you can find an avatar. Just follow this general template. And that's the first step. I love it when people take action. And so I appreciate you giving them the chance to take action and really come away from this episode with something, you know what? I can go do that. I'll go to the missionmaven.com/awesomers right now, and I'll download that thing and I'm going to engage that and get on with the program. So I definitely appreciate that. Awesomers, if you're listening, and you haven't already, paused us and gone over there to that website, you're making a mistake. Get on it now. Take action. We got to do something. Any final words of wisdom, Whitney, for the folks out there?
I've said it probably 1,000 times in this conversation, but just
no exaggeration either. Yeah.
Just be human, right? Like, I just think the value of a human connection is so important. So if you take nothing else away, just be human, talk with your customers, and interact with them like a human.
I like that. To be honest with you, in this world of machine learning and artificial intelligence and all that, everybody's, worried about which robot's going to replace them. And I guarantee you one thing, nobody's going to replace humans, right? And that human relationship, that interaction, and that expectation that, you actually want to deliver overwhelming value to somebody, that's something that is never going to be replaced and will never go out of style. So I love it. Thank you very much, Whitney. I appreciate you taking the time. And kudos to you on putting together the Mission Maven. It does sound like a very compelling proposition and very compelling idea that we all need to take heart in, which is find our customer, talk to our customer in a compelling way, and get those customers to take action long term. Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you so much for just having this conversation. This has been really good.
Definitely my pleasure. Awesomers, we'll be right back after this.
Empower. The name says it all. Connecting e-commerce entrepreneurs with great people, ideas, systems, and the services needed to stay business dynamic and to grow. Empowery is a network, a cooperative venture of tools and resources to make you better at what you do, because we love what you do. We are you. Visit empowery.com to learn more.
Well, I tell you what, we have delivered yet again, I think, something very special. And Rick has, what a great sport to come on for a second time. So this is just part one, by the way, of our two-part series with Rick Cesari. I know I mispronounce his name about every 2 seconds, so my apologies to Rick. But his experience and his knowledge and just his sense of humor and his, just kind of a fun guy to be around. Really, really amazing fella. And we're sure glad he joined us. Today was just the first half of that two-part series, so don't forget to join us tomorrow where we go into the next bit as well. And, today we covered, again, Juice Band, Sonicare, and George Foreman Grill, but tomorrow we're going to dive deep into the other two really cool brands that you've probably heard of, which are GoPro and OxyClean. All of these names are such amazing brands. And your chance to kind of talk to one of the key architects and engineers of these billion-dollar brands is something that I think is quite special. And I feel privileged to just be on the other line with him. And I was lucky enough to have him come to the Catalyst 88 Mastermind group recently and talk to the team there in Seattle at length. And it was just a really great experience. So anyway, this has been a great episode. I can't wait to have you join us tomorrow as well. Don't forget, this is episode number 55 of the Awesomers.com podcast series. And all you have to do is go to Awesomers.com/55 to get all the show notes, details, and bonus links and things like that. Well, we've done it again, everybody. We have another episode of the Awesomers podcast ready for the world. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that you've enjoyed our program today. Now's a good time to take a moment to subscribe, like, and share this podcast. Heck, you could even leave a review if you wanted. Awesomers around you will appreciate your help. It's only with your participation and sharing that we'll be able to achieve our goals. Our success is literally in your hands. Thank you again for joining us. We are at your service. Find out more about me, Steve Simonson, our guests, team, and all the other Awesomers involved at Awesomers.com. Thank you again.